on mass market opportunities. Is it real and how do we capture it? When we talk of mass market opportunity, this mass market is mainly people who are earning between 50,000 rupees per year to 3.5 lakh to 4 lakhs per year, and who are aspirational, who want to move up, but they are not able to connect to the formal banking sector. So this is the mass market which we are talking of. And to discuss on this issue, we have a very eminent panel with us. Archana Bhargavji, she is MD of CMD and of United Bank. Mr. Krishna Kumar, MD SBI. Then we have Mr. George Alexander, MD Muthoot Group. Mahesh Kumar Jain, ED Indian Bank. Kaushik Banerjee, President Asset Finance, Cholamandalam. Manish Khera, CEO and MD Fino. And Bobby Madhav, CEO Commercial and Retail Banking, First Rand Bank, India. So this is a very prominent panel which we have with us. And before we start the discussions, I would request Prabjeet to make a brief presentation, and then we'll take up the discussion. Thank you.
Can you put up the presentation, please? Thank you. Esteemed panelists, member of the audience, good evening. I must start by being a bit angry with Dr. Rajan, at the same time being thankful. Angry because it makes my job very tough to stand up here and talk after him. At the same time, I should thank him for making my job easier by articulating his fourth pillar, the fourth priority for him, around focusing on the underserved segment, which is what we are going to spend the next 1 hour talking about. So what is mass market? Mass market customers is somebody whom we define as households or micro enterprises who have achieved a basic level of sustenance. They are not worried about where the next bread will come from. At the same time, they have aspirations to grow, which they're not able to meet. A large part of this segment today may have a bank account with many of you, but also, as we all recognize, some of them are non-operative. Many of them are not able to rely on the banking sector for all their financial services needs. Some of them are still served by NBFCs, and a large proportion continue to depend on the unorganized sector and who will continue to charge them very high interest rates for their credit needs. So the real crux of this question is, how can banks serve the mass market segment in a commercially viable way and not just as a social obligation? Just to frame the discussion, there are two sub-segments as we see in mass market. On the right-hand side, you see people who are individuals who will be earning anywhere between 50,000 to 1 lakh on the lower side and about 3 lakh of household income before any expenditure on the upper side. Having spent most of their critical expenditures, they're left with very limited savings typically, most of which is actually very irregular, and they neither are left with long-term savings for big events. They don't have much left for buying the things which they're aspiring for. On the other side are what we call the producers, which are the micro enterprises, both in the rural areas, which is either a single farmer tilling a land with his family, or a couple of farmers getting together to till the land, or small enterprises in urban areas, and also individuals who may be running the small enterprises of their own. This constitutes 65% of the total households in the country. I must repeat, this constitutes almost 65% of the total households in the country. And a large proportion of them, interestingly, do have a bank account, thanks to many of you and the push which we have made in the last 5 years to drive inclusion. However, our research indicates that almost 80% of them are dependent on sources outside the banking sector to fund some of the other needs. I'll start with just laying out a few myths which exist about this segment that will set the framing for the rest of the discussion. Myth number 1, serving the mass market is a niche play with very limited revenue potential to make it commercially viable for banks. However, the reality and the fact is that this 65% of households constitute more than 20% of the revenue pools in the country. Of this 20%, a large part, 2/3 of it actually comes from assets, and another 1/3 comes from deposits. While the focus traditionally has just been upon, let's open the account for this segment, and we will do it as a social obligation. By the way, we will make money of the mass affluent and above segment. Reality number 2, this segment today, a large proportion of them actually have a bank account. But if you look at how many of them have a loan from a bank, which is, by the way, their primary need, it's 1/10 of this segment. And where does this segment go? These segments is served by the underserved segment, by the unorganized sector on the right-hand side, as you see. And many of them are paying APRs, which could range from 15% to even 80 or 100% just to meet the requirements, whether it be for emergency purposes, whether it be to expand the business, whether it be to take a small loan to start a new business. The second set of myths, which is quite well prevalent, that the primary need of this segment is too diverse. There are too many segments, many micro segments, many geographies, each of them have a different need. Transaction banking, giving them a bank account, is the only primary need for them. Once they have an account, they can save money, and that will help them grow. There is a very common perception that this segment, because they are, by the way, earning the least, they are very, very price sensitive, and thereby will be unwilling to pay for the services which are offered. The reality for this segment is, based on the research which we have done with customers in India and in other emerging markets, the primary need for many of them, after they have met their sustenance needs, is for credit. In addition, there is needs for remittances. In addition, there are needs for savings, but more importantly, long-term savings, which can help them get ready for big events in their life, whether it be the education of the child, whom they really aspire to get out of the segment they have always been in, or for big events like weddings, etc. And those are the events, those are the occasions which push them in the moments of truth towards the unorganized sector. We talked about the kind of needs they have. While the micro enterprises may have about small expansion needs, it's Diwali time, they want to buy more stock so that they can also, by the way, celebrate the Diwali with their family in a big way, make some extra money. But where do they get the extra credit from? No bank will lend them because they don't have collateral to put in. It just takes too long to do this. They may not have the documentation. They may also have some needs around emergencies. And as we surveyed them, interviewed them, we recognize this is a segment which is not price sensitive. This is value sensitive. They are willing to pay higher price for the services. They are looking for fast approval is what they matter. Price actually is a low component in the hierarchy of needs which they have. The next big set of myths is around how do I assess? Credit is a great need, fantastic, but how do I assess them as a bank? My processes require very strong diligence. I need some collateral. I need somebody to stand guarantee for them. But this segment doesn't have collateral. How do they even get the first loan? In a data scarce environment, because you don't know anything about these customers. They can't provide any documentation. They may not be able to even provide any guarantor who has a loan from the bank before. This is what we believe is a myth. There are beginning to be experiments within India, and some of the panelists will talk about that who have been actively involved in this. There are markets, especially outside India, where banks are beginning to do this. They're relying not just on quantitative data, but qualitative data which is measured and objectively assessed to form a view on the customer. Does it mean that they are being too lax in their rules and regulations? No. They have developed tools which will use third-party data from untraditional sources. For example, there are players in Brazil who are using mobile data, and based on the pattern of call flow, they're able to judge whether a particular person, whether who's a farmer, when is his crop season coming? Is he likely to be under distress, or is his business activity picking up because the calls are picking up? And they're able to tie up with the telecom operator to get that data. Now, this data could be available here, worth exploring. Can we find a way to access that? There are players on the other side. Fine, we can't access risk. How do I underwrite? There's an example of banks in Kenya. I was talking to somebody very recently. They talked about they get the local priest to underwrite or to be a stand guarantor for this individual. And they're tied up with the priest to do that. And come what may, a person would never want to let the priest down, right? Did they rely on quantitative data? Yes, but they did not make the decision solely on that. So there are ways emerging. The next myth which commonly occurs is serving this segment, and as Dr. Rajan also mentioned, we have had a very branch-heavy model. And that's the only way to serve this, and that's why, by the way, we have pushed, including the new bank policy, to open new branches in rural and semi-urban areas. While that is desirable, that is not the way to serve this segment. And our view is that there will be innovations, whether it be technology, whether it be about mobile solutions, and again, some of the panelists will talk about that, given that they are operating in this area. Finally, the last myth is about, at the end of this, if you bring all this together, it is still unviable to create a business model which is scalable for a bank to exclusively focus on this segment. Our supposition, and we have done significant research on this topic of mass market across the world, including with IFC and World Bank, we have found institutions in emerging markets. Indonesia, there are multiple banks which standalone just focus on the mass market. There are examples in South Africa who do that. And they are able to generate return on equities which are higher than the traditional universal banks by adopting some of these ideas. So the challenge which we pose, and as panelists will discuss today, is what do banks in India need to do to be able to serve this segment in a profitable, commercially viable manner. With that, I'll hand over to Mr. Ashwani to take us forward.
So, whether it is a mass market, is it real, or, and how to capture it? So, one thing which has clearly come out by his presentation, Prabhjit, that mass market is definitely real. So, what is to be debated is how do we capture this mass market? As Prabhjit was telling, 20% of the revenue comes from this mass market. 65% of the population belongs to this mass market, but they are not able to access formal source of financing. And worldwide, it has been recognized that for the economic development of any country, financial inclusion is imperative. So this mass market has to be captured by the system, by the formal financial system, in which a lot of work has been done by NBFCs. And this access to a formal financial sector, the main access required by these people is affordable credit. And this affordable credit will definitely help in poverty alleviation and also improving the social disparity or removing the social disparity. With this small brief, I would ask my first question to my colleague, Madam Archana Bhargav. There are a number of challenges in this area, servicing the mass market, both at the individual level and micro enterprise level. What are the thoughts you have on this, Madam Archana?
Thank you, Ashwani ji. A very good evening to all of you. This question has been debated since morning, that India, with this population of 130 crores, has 65% people who are a target audience for mass banking. And let me tell you that this is a very challenging and daunting task, no doubt. The exercise started way back in 1969 when we had the nationalization of banks. The idea was to bring the Indian masses into the banking fold. Many concepts were formed. We had the priority sector and lead banking concept, the local area banks, the service area banks, the urban cooperative banks, the regional rural banks. And for the last decade or so, a lot of thrust has been given on commercial banks, the public sector banks, to take this concept forward. And of course, we have succeeded. The 6 lakh villages that India had, around 2 lakhs stand covered with the constant follow-up from the regulator, the RBI. We had the concept of covering up all those villages which had a population of more than 2,000 crores. And all the banks have joined hands to work in their niche areas. But then the mass markets are not only in the rural segments, they're also in the urban segments. India has a very young rural, population now. And this 35% young India also needs to be covered. There are challenges. And what are those challenges? The first and foremost is financial literacy, or rather I should say the lack of financial knowledge. Then is the access to banking channels, affordability, and of course the other things that we talked about is lack of credit history and lack of collaterals. Let me first cover the financial literacy part of it. People in rural segments really do not know how to save. You know, they've been used to putting money beneath their beddings or burying it somewhere in their courtyard, or just buying gold or land out of it, thinking that this would stand by them in times of need. Now, these are all non-productive channels of saving. They are not a channel which will get you any return. Maybe some kind of return comes from property, but then there are very few people who can actually buy property. So the savings in the rural segment are not tapped by the banking system. They don't figure in our GDP. And there is a whole parallel economy running in our country in the rural segments. We have to bring that segment into our fold. And the best way to do it is to teach them why it is important to save. Now, this financial literacy concept has also been promoted by the regulator. And each of the banks is supposed to set up a financial literacy and counseling center in the districts that they cover. Say for United Bank, we have 34 lead districts, and in each of the districts, we have set up a financial literacy and counseling center. What really works more than distributing pamphlets, here again you have a literacy issue, people don't know how to read pamphlets. So the best thing is to get onto these videos which really work, and you take these mobile vans from villages to villages, or you make them come to the literacy centers, you provide transport for them, and you tell them what is money, how is it to be saved, and what are the best avenues for saving. And let me tell you, it works miracles. It's not that it doesn't work. I will share certain personal experiences with you. In the last 3 months, we've opened around 150 branches in totally unbanked centers. And we went on a campaign mode in opening the accounts and telling people through video shows why it was important to open accounts with us and how their money would be safe. And I'm happy to tell you that more than 1 crore of deposit came in to each of these branches. Because then people don't know how to get onto it. They don't know how to fill an account opening form. They don't know how to give their money. They don't know how to read a receipt. But once you educate them that the bank would do all this for you, it works. But then the question is, how many such branches can you open? There's a cost attached to each brick and mortar branch, and that is where the challenge lies for the banking sector. The NBFCs have been successful because they've been operating in local terrains. They had local people who did everything for them. So for the banking sector, the challenge is to now identify a location where you can house a branch and let that branch cater to at least adjacent cluster of villages. So some 10, 15 villages get covered from that main branch that forms the epicenter, and you have BCs which operate from the other villages. Now these BCs are hired by the bank as sons of the soil. You see, there is a huge reliability and trust factor. A villager needs to know, am I dealing with a bank employee or am I dealing with somebody who will run away with my money? But when you come out with the concept of hiring a local son of the soil, you get his police verification done, you get a recommendation from the Gram Pradhan. The villagers have a trust, they have yes, this is our man and he's not going to run away with our money. So that is the added factor which we've tried to introduce. Then we branched out opening these ultra small branches. Now, if you house the BC in a particular place, rather than let him be mobile, people know exactly where to go. They know that the BC is available at a particular location. That ultra small branch carries a bank signage board, okay, and the BC is available there from 10 to 5. Now, what you need for the BC to operate, he has to have some connectivity with the main branch. That is where technology steps in. And with the advent of technology, these things have become much easier. You have the concept where an officer visits the branch once in a week. He does the financial transactions, but the other non-financial transactions, which are done on an everyday basis, are done by the BC who's housed here. And it is additional income for the business correspondent, because we normally pay him a fixed salary and some fee per transaction. But when you try to hire out a premises and you hire out the BC's premises, it is additional income for him. He's almost like a quasi-employee of the bank without being on your payrolls. So that is a model which works. And this is actually, the banks have done nothing new. They've only emulated the model of the NBFCs. Because the NBFCs, why were they successful? They hired local sons of the soil. So it works very well with banks also. The other thing is of access. As I said, once you give them the access, once you make them understand how they can save, what is the kind of return they will get on their money, you try and make them understand that if you have a bank account, you're also eligible for credit. These 4 products that we've been talking about since morning, they were talked about by the finance minister, they were talked about by the governor and other speakers also, that basically they need a savings product, savings cum overdraft product. They need a remittance module to remit money to different places. They also need a credit model where they can buy credit from the bank or take credit from the bank in times of emergencies as well as for their livelihood. If you promise him a 5,000 rupees overdraft, as we normally do when we open savings account, he knows that he can rely on that 5,000 rupees overdraft in times of illness or in times of dire need. So it helps him out. Similarly, we do livelihood creation. Livelihood creation is done through our RCTs. All banks have opened RCTs where skill updation is being done, where counseling is done on the kind of avenues that are available. And the simple thing is that now we have turned to alternative channels. Even where we are giving Kisan credit cards, we are now giving the ATM cards, we are installing the ATMs. So people have alternative channels other than mobile banking. Of course, the rural populace, because it is a young India again, and I think most of the people living in villages have access to mobile phones. So they feel very comfortable doing transactions through mobile banking. And they feel very comfortable using the ATMs, which is anywhere, anytime banking for them. So that is another means and ways of combating the challenges which are posed. The third thing, of course, is affordability. As I said, it is not easy to open brick and mortar branches. You have to hire out a premises. There has to be connectivity. You have to provide hardware and software. And most importantly, you have to provide at least 3 or 4 members of staff. You need a manager, you need an officer, you need at least 2 clerks. People are not willing to go to these unbanked rural terrains. There's a level of discomfort. They're not willing to do those hardship postings. And the cost of, for such officers is exorbitant to the bank. So to cut down on costs, we have, all of us have imbibed the BC model. And I think it is working very well because it helps in the sector of getting the kind of business that banks are looking upon. Of course, it is a matter of time. Nothing has grown overnight. It is a matter of time. In, I think, 5 years' time since RBI started this concept in 2008 of covering unbanked villages, much has been done. Similarly, for the urban population, now, if you have a young India, it's looking for a house, it's looking for a four-wheeler, it's looking for white goods. And that is where the potential lies, in tapping them. So when we come out with our schemes and we're able to send messages through mobile phones, we do cross-selling of our existing customers. Banks have a huge customer base, but we are not cross-selling to them. With the advent of technology, we are able to cross-sell to them. We are able to send them messages. They are able to respond through internet banking. It is opening up big areas for us to push mass banking. In the case of micro enterprise, we do have a problem that they don't have collaterals and there is no record of history, so as to say. But there are other assessment techniques by which you can assess the requirement of credit. You can create a viable model for lending. Of course, it takes time to understand. It takes time at both the ends. It takes time at the end of the bank, at bank level. It takes time at the end of the customer level to understand how and when they should approach. But I think all in all, it is a confidence building exercise. If financial inclusion is to happen in the country, there has to be hand-holding and there has to be a relationship of trust and confidence which will take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Madam Bhargava has covered a wide area of financial inclusion and mass banking. So, a lot of challenges are there, as she has told. Major challenges to provide them credit. When we talk of mass market, we are talking of segments which are earning above 50,000 rupees and income below 4 lakh rupees, who desire mainly, who have aspirational and who desire to grow by borrowing. The first step required for them would be borrowing. So NBFCs have been playing a very vital role in mass marketing, and we don't have a better person than Mr. Muthoot on this. If he can tell how are they working and how can we also become a part of this growth process.
Thank you,
We
sir.
say we mean Nationalized Bank.
Thank you, sir. Coming from a non-banking finance company and addressing a group mainly of bankers here, I feel little out of place, as little part out of place. But if we look at what is mass market, who are the people who are going to be the beneficiaries of the mass market, it should be the urban poor, the rural poor, the rural areas, semi-urban areas, etc. These people need financial inclusion. And what exactly should we see as financial inclusion? Financial inclusion is not simply putting money in the hands of people, but making them also part of the Indian growth story. The Indian growth story or where the prosperity is there in India should not be only with the affluent or the city, but it should percolate to all the mass market. And there, financial inclusion plays a very important part. And putting purchasing power in the hands of these mass market customers would also mean spurring the economic growth of the country. They will, at one point, be the real drivers of the economy to a considerable extent. Today, how are they served? Yes, they are served by the scheduled commercial banks. They are served by the NBFCs to a large extent, and also the local money lender, the pawnbroker, all the local lenders. They are also all what you call the informal sector. Today, they are served by there. What are their challenges? See, merely opening a bank account, a savings bank account, or any bank account for somebody in the mass market does not mean financial inclusion. He should get credit, he should get purchasing power. That is the real challenge. And today, the chair has asked me how banks and NBFCs work together. Yes, banks and NBFCs should work together in the mass market. It is not that NBFCs are the only ones who can look after or take care of the financial inclusion. Banks do. Banks do a great extent. To some extent, NBFCs also do. But we should work, or rather, they should work hand in hand. As far as our company, Muthoot Finance, is concerned, we have more than 60% of our branches in the rural and semi-urban areas. Of the 4,300 branches, a majority, as I said, 70%, 60% is in these areas. And they serve these customers with primarily gold loans. Now, how do one instance or one demonstration of how our company, NBFCs, works hand in hand with banks on a lighter note is that of the 4,300 branches, we have 5,500 officers. Of that, 2,900 are retired from banks from scale 1 to scale 6. So I think we have demonstrated that we work hand in hand with the banks. We have scale 1 officers, scale 2, scale 3, scale 5, and we have CMDs also working with us. So I think that is on the lighter side, I said that. But on the serious note, working with how do we get them to access credit? What we do is gold loaning. And what we did in South India, which gold loaning was very prevalent, very popular in South India, was not heard of beyond the South India. In the last 15 years, our company has done a lot of advertisements and also marketed the concept of gold loans all over the country. Very few other institutions have done that, have spent money on that. But today, everybody is harvesting the benefits of that. It's good. It is again putting money, purchasing power in the hands of people. These people would never have got correct credit, quick credit. But because of monetizing the idle assets, the idle jewelry, yes, we have been able to put purchasing power in the hands of people. Now, partnering with banks, again, of our liability side, we have a asset under management gold loans of about 24,000 crores. Of that, a good part, 10,000 crores, again, comes from banks. Here also, we partner with the scheduled banks. So scheduled banks partner with us in that respect also. So together with scheduled banks, together with NBFCs, I think we are also doing it, and we should be able to do it much better. We can again partner with scheduled banks in putting financial inclusion to the mass market. I have with me, shall I, sir, with your permission, shall I, Mr. Kaushik Banerjee also? Yes, Kaushik.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Just to recap the question, it says NBFCs have served this segment better historically. So to take over from Mr. Muthoot, on a lighter note again, banks have traditionally enjoyed a lower cost of funds historically than NBFCs have. As a result of that, typically NBFCs have had to find a customer segment which was willing to pay more for the risk that we ended up carrying. Given this, structurally banks, structurally and in terms of philosophy, banks and NBFCs do differ. Structurally, banks are typical pull models where the customer would need to walk into a bank to access a service. The way an NBFC operates is where the executives of the NBFC goes into the market to acquire customers. And what's also important to remember here is that when we talk about the mass market, we are typically talking about a higher risk segment than a top of the pyramid customer. Now, a fundamental difference between a bank and an NBFC is that a bank, by definition, is largely risk averse, whereas by definition, an NBFC is a risk manager, because we do know that we are taking a risk on a higher, we're taking exposures on higher risk customers. So if you go and look at the models of NBFCs and look at the models of banks, you'll find that NBFC will have a very, very strong collection recovery mechanism in place precisely to ensure that we collect money back from these borrowers. They're far more vulnerable in terms of definition than, again, a high net worth borrower. Let me just give an example. We take security PDCs from every single customer that we lend to. So he does have a bank account. But 75% of our customers pay us back in cash. Now, you need to be there at the right time to collect the money. These customers may have the intent to pay, but they're notorious for the indiscipline of making payments. So unless you have the structure in place to be there when he has money in his hand, he will go into default. So having said that, I must say that there are banks which have built a successful franchise in the mass market space. I won't take the names, but there are banks which have successfully built on this. So for a bank to be a viable player, there needs to be a structural change in terms of the fact that a banking model would need to be more of a push model rather than a pull model. The bank's banking structures would need to have people in place to actually go and collect money from customers rather than expecting customers to walk into the bank to make the payments. We do have walk-in customers who make payments. That's 15% of our total lending base. For the balance 85%, we do have to go out and collect the money. This is a fundamental requirement to address the mass market segment. Now, this is not in place. Very quickly, defaults will build up. And once a mass market borrower has gone into default, it is very, very difficult to bring him back to normalcy. So I would like to kind of leave the thought with you that structurally a bank needs to change. Philosophically, a bank needs to change because the bank is risk averse. NBFCs are risk managers. And at the grassroots level, the approach to a mass market customer has to become more risk appetite based rather than a risk averse approach.
Thank you, Mr. Banerjee. Banks are, first let me tell you, banks are not risk averse. We also take risk. So it's not a question of risk averse, but it's a sector which you are financing a different sector and we are financing a different sector. And we are financing you also, so we are not risk averse as such. So, having said that, the model which has been described by Kaushik ji and Mr. Muthoot, banks can also emulate that model, but before we enter into that area, we have with us Mr. Bobby Madhav, who is from First Rand, and he has an international experience in mass market. So before we take it further, I would request Mr. Madhav to share his international experience and if he has any new model in mind which can be replicated by the banks here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown on the Mzansi account, which is similar to the unbanked sector in India. We use this in South Africa. In 2008, this was launched by the regulator in South Africa to say we need to get the unbanked banked or the bankable banked who are unbanked. and a regulation was sort of preceded by that. However, whilst we introduced this into the market space, there was concern because regulation prohibited banks from overcharging or charging certain fees for services rendered, etc. Now, when we start doing things like this, it automatically inhibits a bank from introducing innovation. When you want to be different from any other bank in the country, you cannot differentiate because it's capped. Everybody has to charge the same pricing, etc. So a couple of things that we needed to start with. Number one is I think Ms. Archana mentioned the lack of financial literacy. It is a problem. However, I do find it a bit different in India. I find that the people are very numerically capable. They understand figures and numbers. I think they just need the know-how of understanding how to utilize a banking account. So from that perspective, I do feel that we're very comfortable launching the product here in India. We also don't think that there's a need for presence in every city, etc. We need to move away from this concept of brick and mortar. Everywhere I see in India, when I talk to any customer, I mean, we are one branch outlet in this country. And every time I bump into an executive or somebody that I'm going to be enticing to bring his account across, the first thing he tells me is, where is your branch? So I said, okay, it's in BKC. Oh, you're very far, I can't move my account to you. So I said, when last have you been to the bank? And he looked at me and says, I can't remember anymore. I think it's a sense of security, whether this bank is reliable, etc. Now, going into this unbanked sector, it's also a problem because they want to physically see the presence of something on the ground. And one of the key things we're now pushing, and regulation prohibits us, obviously, here in India, but in South Africa, they've promulgated and changed some of the regulation where banks can charge much more now. So if you use a branch, you can up your pricing. Automatically, people then move to the correct channels where it's cheaper. So cell phone banking, internet banking, etc., becomes much, much more cheaper. We have a difference in terms of usage of electronics in country. 70% of our people use electronic channels for banking. 20% still are sitting with checks, etc., but that's also been phased out. So you have a high proportion of your society that's actually using the cell phone banking mechanism. And that helps bank to lower its costs. Now, we will never get into the unbanked sector if it's not going to be profitable. Now, and that's a big myth with everybody, that it's a social responsibility that you have to get into the unbanked sector. It is profitable. You need to make sure your models work, and you need to make sure your platforms are capable of reducing your costs. And therefore, technology has to play a part. If you do not invest in technology in that particular sector, you will have the bricks and mortar all your life. Okay, it is the educational process that you have to go through to enable the customer to move on in that space. So I spoke about the pricing. The other challenge we had back home was the inactive account base. And I heard also from a lot of people about the inactive account base you get in that unbanked sector. One of the key fundamentals about inactive accounts is the connectivity in that space. How often do you talk to that customer? Once he opens his account, when last do you actually get to that customer, whether it's in an electronic format, an SMS format, etc.? We've got 30 or 35,000 accounts now in that unbanked sector here in Mumbai at the moment. And one of the key factors I was worried about was the inactiveness. We now sit at 70% plus active accounts, purely because of an engagement between us and the user of the account, constantly messaging, talking to him, giving him the ability to utilize the account on the right channels. So it's also, again, a myth that you have a lot of inactive accounts. It's the time and energy you spend and dedicated teams that you have that actually concentrate on it, on that sector. So a lot of the questions was also brought around in terms of the economics of making money in that sector. Okay, so in South Africa, we're fortunate. Regulation doesn't prohibit us from not charging for certain services, etc., and there are no caps. Okay, other than the Usury Act or in terms of your interest rate. So we have the ability to have the flexibility, but we do migrate. We want to ensure that they do pay cheaper fees, but we migrate them to electronic channels. So one of the key factors that we find is that the delivery channels are important. So you've got to start thinking of migrating that particular workforce or customer base into the electronic channels. So some of the benefits we created and we made it very aware to the public out there, is that it's a safe storage about keeping money with the bank. It's a myth that they keep it under the mattress and it's a better sort of source. One of the key factors is the ability to give that dignity to that individual. When they come to a bank, when I speak to a lot of the customers in Dharavi, etc., when I do walk on the ground in some of the slum areas, etc., it's that fear of getting into a bank and being discouraged from entering the bank, etc. No customer, to me, is not important. Any customer, if he has an account with an institution, must have the ability to walk through your branch. It is for you to migrate him into the right channel. And we must start giving the bottom end of the market some sense of dignity, and you would see a big change in that space. The other thing that we found is data is very, very important. Now, if you do not have active base, you cannot land into that base. So one of the key factors that I'm driving at the moment is to ensure that the analytical process that we do drive behind customers and their usage, I do have some sort of trend of the customer's usage of the account. It gives me some sense of confidence of a level of saying, to what level can I actually lend to this customer? So data plays a very, very important role in this segment. Obviously, we want to improve savings. We've also created the cell phone app for the lower end of the market, where you can walk in his palm. So it doesn't have to be a smartphone. It can be a normal phone that is not a smartphone, but is able to do bill payments, is able to do remittances, etc. So you actually take him away from the presence of the bricks and mortar. It's very important that you develop these capabilities. So from the India perspective, obviously, we've introduced this. We've got a zero balance savings account, a real-time activation of accounts. It's under 10 minutes we open an account. At any one given point, the person's given his card, he's given his PIN, and it's activated electronically. Some of the challenges we do have is getting the actual information from a BC back into the bank. It's a couple of the things that we're starting to do in terms of scanning and processing, where we can do real-time activation. At the moment, it's overnight, but we want to move to a real-time activation of an account. Some of the things that we find in terms of the low end of the market is the sense of understanding of security for the future. So, for me and you, as we sit here, we understand insurance products, we understand the savings products, we understand investments for the future. But that end of the market, if they somewhat disasters or whatever occurs, they are not capable of getting some reward back in terms from an insurance. So we've set with two big groups in this country. We've now developed specific insurance products for that bottom end of the market that enables those people now to invest, whether it's for the kids' future or whether it's for the individual's personal health or for the individual's personal tragedies that may occur. And it's very, very important that we actually done that in India. From a telecom perspective, we're also making it in the palm of their hands as opposed to go to anywhere to upload, etc. When they do need airtime, etc. We've created a whole bouquet of products now that the individuals can capable. So what we've done is that we've put in all the capability in the hands of the individual, and we see them now. The utilization is getting better and better. From a loans perspective, we are in the phase of switching on loans. At this moment in time, we haven't been doing loans. We will switch loans on from January onwards, but it's also going to be on an incremental basis. And like I said, it's the analytics that will play out for us in order to land in that market space. The other challenge we did have is the capability and the type of BCs that you have. How do you appoint a BC in this country? Because a lot of the BCs are not financially literate. They may understand how to do business, but when it comes to financial literacy and giving the individual some advice, etc., it's very, very difficult. So hence, my utmost call to regulators is that we need to see another model in the country where we can allow MFIs and banks to partner, because they are in a lot of the sectors where we can actually partner together. The other important thing is also the access to ATMs. We've now created ATMs in a lot of these areas. We've put in place ATMs for every BC. And we've also made the look and feel of these BCs to look like a semi-branch. So it's not just another hole in the wall, but you make it look dignified, seating, ATM, etc. So we are using a lot of the Indian product that is a low-cost ATM in country, and it works for us very well. The remittance point, I think a couple of challenges we have as foreign banks, and I know we're going to, the regulation is changing, but the 30-kilometer radius within which you have to operate doesn't help, that you're restricted. So hopefully that will help us if that opens up. The other thing on remittances also, there are caps. 10,000 at a time per person in that category. But if the individual goes to any remittance point, and if he doesn't have an account, he can remit up to 25,000. So there's this correlation in some of the regulation that has been passed. So there needs to be some tidying up and making sure that it's unified and standard across the board. So on that particular note, I just think that we're definitely here in country to stay for a long time. And I think we're very proud for the fact that we have ventured as a MNC in the unbanked sector, is because we do feel that there is a space to make money in that sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Prabhajit, would you like to add anything on this?
I think Bobby captured a lot of them. I'll just add 2 points. If you look at international examples, I mentioned there are 2 big learnings which we have on innovations which have happened to serve the segment. I think one, as Bobby mentioned, also was a community-based model which is very outbound focused, where branches have a very limited role to play, to actually go out and end-to-end, a person who's recruited from the community is a bank employee, is not actually a BC, the full-time bank employee, but spends 85% of his or her time out in the field, sourcing loans, sourcing accounts, doing collections, is something which many players have adopted, is one of the biggest ways we believe in India also. Some of the newer generation banks which come in will have to do that. Also going back to the point which the FM made in the morning about the new banks not being clones of the existing banks, I think this could be one of the big change which happens. The second innovation from international banks is being on how they think of funding. And third is about how they think of organization. On funding, we've had examples. There's an example of a bank in Indonesia, BTPN, where they are very much focused on the mass market using an outbound sales model to make sure that the economics is actually get justified. They also have a set of separate branches for purely liability gathering, which are very affluent focused. So what they do is they set up a bunch of branches, which are very welcoming to mass affluent and affluent. They use them by giving them slightly above market rates on deposits, take those funds, lend them at a higher rate to the mass market, because that's a segment, by the way, which is willing to pay for that, because the rates will still be lower than the unorganized sector. They're thereby able to create a very profitable franchise. As we look around, I think that, again, is a very interesting model for banks in India or NBFCs looking to convert to banks to explore, versus the traditional model of trying to not being very focused and trying to get the same segment to actually fund the credit, because this segment does not have sufficient savings which you will be able to deploy on credit. So that's the second big learning. The third is on how you organize. The biggest challenge which banks in India would face is, if you do decide to focus on the mass market in a significant and a commercially viable manner, do you do it within the current structure or do you think of it a bank within a bank and let a subsidiary or a separate vertical in a bank operate independently? Now, why is that important? If you want to operate a community-led model where you have recruited son of the soils as an employee, where you want to run a different set of processes and regulations permitting you want to do a differential pricing, doing it within the same bank structure is very tough. You cannot have an employee who's serving a mass affluent segment in the traditional branch being paid higher than an outbound Salesforce employee whom we have set up in a semi-urban under the same brand. So that's a real debate. And if we look back on how different banks have done, there's no one common trend, but increasingly banks are exploring the option of a separate vertical with a very different set of policies, a different set of employees, but within the umbrella brand, which lets them get the benefit of the bigger balance sheet, at the same time create the human capital differences which are required to run an institution like this. So again, those are 3 big learnings as I look at international examples. One is being able to, on the organization structure. Second is about the funding itself. And third is outbound weight community-led models, which banks have begun to adopt, which is an extension of the BC model, which many banks, of course, in India are also inventing.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby and Prabhajit. So one thing has clearly come out with the discussions, that mass market has to be tapped. And for tapping mass market, we cannot follow the traditional branch model. So a number of examples have been given by Bobby and Prabhajit. So a separate vertical type has to be created, whether we do community-based module or we have some other module, but one fact has clearly come out that maybe the branch model may not be possible. And second is the transaction costs should be less. So to improve the transaction cost, I think technology is required. So we have very eminent person with us, Mr. Krishna Kumar, MD SBI, and he will tell us how we can use technology to reduce transaction cost. And then we have Mr. Manish Khera from Fino. Fino has been a pioneer in technology for banking. So I would request first Kumar Saab and then Manish to take on the stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I think my task is much easier now because all the speakers before me have already covered the basic points relating to the alternate models for banking in the unbanked space. But then I'd still like to make a couple of points. One is that, yes, it's true that the branch banking model as of now is not cost effective if it were to be opened up especially in the rural space. In the urban space, a branch banking model already exists, and the existing network, I think, is more than sufficient to take care of any requirement of the unbanked people in the urban areas, though perhaps there's still scope for opening up some branches in certain pockets of urban and metro areas. But in the rural areas, the very fact that the rural hinterland is vast, has very poor infrastructure, leads us to the conclusion that perhaps, to begin with, a branch will not be viable. But again, I do not entirely subscribe that this is true. And as Mr. Madhav just pointed out, there is a psychological feeling amongst the rural people that unless they see a particular branch or see a particular nameplate and a board and a building which says XYZ Bank, they don't feel comfortable. They feel it's somebody who has come there to take away their money and go. But then it's because of this that I think in the last few years, the regulators have permitted us to go into what is now popularly called the BC model with various customer service points. Now, the BC model is very cost effective as far as the transaction costs go. And perhaps in the days ahead, this is the way to push for financial inclusion or for capturing the banking transactions of the potential banking transactions of those who are not yet banked. What is happening right now is that most of the BC transactions, if not all, most of them anyway, are focused merely on deposit mobilization, deposit gathering, and account opening. There is very little activity in terms of extension of credit, and even though there is a simple overdraft product available for distribution amongst the customers, but neither the BC agents or the BC's employees nor the bankers feel very comfortable in pushing this product more aggressively. Perhaps now that since 5 or 6 years have passed since the BC model started, I think it's time the bankers' mindset, the BC CSP's mindset, the customer service points mindset should change, and maybe the aggressive pushing of loan products, simple loan products, could also start. Now, the entire BC model cannot work, obviously, on the same basis as a manual banking model where persons come to the branches and deposit cash or draw money. So that is why technology and its use is very important in the BC model. The best model of the BC, the best technology model which we have found in State Bank of India is what we call the kiosk model, where there is a laptop or a PC connected to the internet, and the BC or his agent finds a particular spot, a fixed spot. Maybe he's in a kirana shop in the village, or maybe he takes up a small room on rent, and the villagers and the customers in the rural space come there for their daily transactions. Now, this laptop or PC is connected to the internet and connected to the core banking of the bank. through proper safeguards so that the transactions are practically real time. In fact, they are real time, so that at any point in time, the customer who has deposited money can be also given a passbook saying that so much of amount has been credited to your account, and therefore this is the proof of the credit. This is not to say that this system is entirely foolproof. There have been scattered instances we have faced across the country where certain unscrupulous people have put up boards saying they represent State Bank of India, for example, and they have taken away money from the people, but they were never ever part of the BC chain which had been authorized by State Bank. But then that is just that's a different issue, and maybe that is why we need a further mechanism, some sort of a risk mitigation, where the where the officer or some responsible person from the nearby branch or the office of the bank comes down and demonstrates to the people around the BC's office that yes, this is a genuine office of the BC and it represents XYZ Bank or State Bank of India, whichever bank they are transacting on behalf of. Now, using technology for deposits is something which I think has been very successful, especially in the online opening of savings bank accounts. What surprised me when we in State Bank started this online opening of savings bank accounts about a year ago or a year and a half ago, we found that while it was not picking up at all in the urban and metro areas, it was a great success in the rural and maybe even some certain semi-urban areas because of the BCs or because of internet cafes who were facilitating the potential account holder in opening the account online, and then the account holder had just to visit the nearest branch for completion of the mandatory KYC formalities. Now that shows the potential of this particular channel, the technology, the use of technology in the rural space. And I see no reason why it cannot be extended and made more popular even in the urban and metro areas, because the internet connectivity in these segments, urban and metro, is much better than what we find in the rural areas. One final point on technology, going ahead, when I spoke about the need to push now for the popularization of credit, of loan products, of simple loan products, perhaps using technology, what we could do is to have templated formats with a scorecard-based model, which will be filled up by the BC in the laptop or PC which he has in his village, and that gets uploaded to the nearest branch, where the officer concerned looks at the information given and then says yes or no for the loan, which is as simple a product under the loan segment as you can find. One method which, another way in which we could probably leverage the network. The network is tying up with the FMCGs. Now we have in State Bank tied up with an FMCG whose agents go around working as BCs for our bank in certain villages where their products are also sold. So this serves a double purpose. That is, the agent of the FMCG gets the additional income as a BC representative of the bank, and also is able to liaise with the stockists in the village of the FMCG product, who might again require some small amount of loan towards working capital requirements, and which is again taken up with the nearest branch. Now this is a model which we've been trying out for the last couple of years, and it seems to be quite successful. In fact, the numbers and the transactions under this have been going up quite rapidly over the last couple of years, and more so in the last few months. So tie up with an FMCG company or those who have strong distribution networks in certain rural areas or in certain pockets would also help in pushing this, in pushing the mass market and pushing the banks in tapping the mass market. As I said, most of the other points have already been covered by the other speakers, so I'd not like to test the patience of the audience by repeating them. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. To me, this seems more like a rhetoric than a question, if you ask me. And I, in a way, slightly also feel awkward talking about it. There is so much of experience, so much of depth across the room to talk about, to say that how can banks leverage technology and alternate distribution networks to reach out to customers, seems awkward to me now. The answer I think we found 7 years back, or agreed 7 years back, to say that we can reach out to large unbanked masses in the country through an agent network. And if you see the journey that has been covered in the last 7 years, it's been fantastic journey. 200 million plus customers being covered by all banks, all clusters of population more than 2,000 being covered by one or the other BC, and now headed for a 1,000 plus population clusters, and across host of products, across host of types of BCs, let's say, and variety of technology solutions which have come across. So there is so much that the banking industry has done in the last 7 years that the base now is fairly well established. And if you ask me, the biggest validation for me was what we saw in the morning, all those awards which were given out to all the banks. So much of innovation, so much of new things which have got adopted. You try to find a parallel in any other industry, we will find it hard. The kind of leading innovations that so many banks had come up with, and there would have been, I'm sure, far more that the jury would have considered, which didn't show up here. So excellent work which has happened in these last 7 years. So very, it sounds, as I said, like a rhetoric to say, how can banks do? They are already doing it and doing so much there. So only a few things that, I can possibly share based on our experience of working in this sector over the last 7 years and now serving some 70 million plus customers for all you banks put together through some 30,000 BC points in the country. On technology, let me say that first. I think there is a lot of depth in all banks to evaluate technologies. Most of the times I have seen we try to come up with the best technology answer from outside. I don't think we'll find it. Each bank takes its own call on technology choices, whether it be a core banking system or ATMs or devices. Some banks run acquiring business, some banks don't run it, some banks want to put ATMs, some banks don't want to put ATMs, they want to ride on the other networks. These are choices we all make based on business decisions, based on our view on where technology is headed, where things are headed, and they are all good choices. None of them are wrong choices, let's say. But one thing that we have seen, or rather two variants of the same thing. One, as I said, there is enough experience in the ecosystem now on technology choices. A few technologies have worked, a few have not worked. And technologies fail not just because of commercial reasons. Sometimes the technology, a particular technology, is not able to scale up for its own challenges in the technology design itself. It's nothing to do with the cost of the technology. Sometimes they fail for commercial reasons. Whichever way, as I said, there is enough experience now, enough filtering which has happened on the technology. Those choices exist. We should stay with that. It doesn't mean that we'll stop innovation. We'll continue innovating, and as I said, banks seem to be at the forefront of innovation. So innovation will continue, but we need to leverage what we have. And in the same vein, I should also say, we need to integrate this customer base with what we currently call as the mainstream customer base. So technology choices will also have to follow the same pattern. Technology will have to integrate, or this technology that we are deploying for the BC network will have to integrate with our so-called mainstream customer, and it's happening. The line is blurring between the customers who are being serviced by BC and so-called the mainstream customers which are being serviced from branch. On the business, again, I would say there is enough experience. Very broadly said, 2 products to a customer is a viable proposition to everybody across the chain. We saw McKinsey's report also, loans, remittances, insurance, payments. Those are the kind of priority that the customer wants. Again, as bankers, I'm sure everybody can take those choices. If we are not able to figure out a loan model, incidentally, there is one. All of us or all the bankers do SHGs as the lending model for same customer segment. The question we need to ask ourselves is our BC doing SHG or not? If we don't want to go in the loan direction, we can always sell insurance to the same customer. We can always start doing remittances as a second product to savings for the same customer. So 2 products is the answer, one way or the other. I'm sure we will figure it out, how to do it. Just lastly, I would say, the BC itself is a piece where, again, there is enough experience, and we need to understand and leverage that. The 2 types of BCs that you have. One type of BC you have what you may call as a thin BC, somebody who's running one existing business model and whom we are trying to integrate into the banking fold to say, can we leverage on that network and run that model? Most of these BCs will continue doing their current business, whether they are FMCG companies, telecom operators, whatever be their business, because that's what they do. They're trying to enter this market for additional revenue, sometimes for customer stickiness, sometimes for other reasons. That's what I think of as a thin BC. And then you have a dedicated BC or a BC which serves the bank's objectives. You require a BC for 3 reasons. You needed a BC for doing products, because that's what you want to do. As I said, 2 products and maybe more is what you want to do. You need a BC to do cash logistics. Your transaction point is away from your branch. You need somebody to ferry cash back and forth for you. It's a bank cash. It's a risk that you have taken on the entity who's going to do it. And then technology. You will deploy a technology architecture. Somebody needs to maintain that technology architecture. You need a BC which does, or a corporate BC, let's call it, which does it for you, acts as an intermediate there. That's what we need to make a right choice there, that we have the right type of BC partner there who's able to serve the objective of the bank. If you are able to make these right choices, of course, the answers are all around us, and we are seeing so many successes already there. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. And I think the topic given to this panel is so interesting that we have already overshot our time. And so I have very little time left with me, though I think we can continue discussion for another 1 hour or so. So my last question would be to Mr. Mahesh Kumar Jain, because this sector has no collateral or credit history. So how can the banks overcome this? With this, I think the panel would be over. Then if we have another 5 minutes, we can take up question answers.
Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Chairman. I think most of the things have already covered by most of the speakers. The today's evening thought is mass market opportunity. Is it real, and how to capture? I will take only 1 minute. Is it real? We worked out certain statistical information. If 70% of the 110 million farmers needs credit, then it comes to around, and if we multiply with 50,000 rupees each, it comes to 38 lakh 50,000 crore. Presently, we are having only 6 lakh crore. If we take that 1% of the car segment only in the rural areas and other areas, I think there's a phenomenal growth. If we see the FMCG and consumer goods growth, mainly it is coming from rural semi-urban sectors. So there is a need. Microcredit demand, if it is extrapolated, presently it is 26,000 crore, it comes to around 3 lakh crore by 200 million people. So that is the potential. Similar is in MSME. 22% of GDP growth contribution comes from MSME, whereas in US, it is close to 60%. So there is no doubt about it, and I think every one of us understand and aware of this potential. So opportunity is real, there is no doubt about it. The question comes how to capture it. Mr. Bobby has covered a lot of things, that what they have practiced and what they have seen the market. What basically we observe that there are a couple of things. One is the speed. Speed in delivery, timeliness. Just now organizer also sent a feeler that time is running out. So time is running out to capture this market. Time is also running out to deliver the things. Why people are having, and second thing is easy access. Why this people, the mass market people, they are having easy access to money lenders because of the two reasons that there are not much questions being asked. It is delivery is very excellent, as well as timeliness is very important. So first thing, the banks, the problem which they are facing, gathering the information. So a lot of things are happening, being we are not having the complete information, so there is a risk awareness to finance these people. As Mr. Prabhajit told in the beginning, probably there can be certain information system through either mobile banking, where there are around 903 million subscribers today in India, and out of that, 1/3 is in rural segment. So there can be some behavioral pattern captured through the mobile banking database, and the way credit information bureaus are collecting the telecom data, and probably their times may be very near when there may be a credit information bureau with all these things, and then they can convert this score. Second thing which is very, very important, localization of the people. The same RRBs are having regional rural banks, their credit delivery is much, much better and much more than the sponsored banks. The reason is that people are localized. They understand the need of the people, they mingle with them, they connect with them very well, and that is how basically they are able to understand their credit worthiness, and they are able to understand their needs of the credit, which may not necessarily be verifying the end use, rather certain cash component as well. Second thing is, which basically most of us face a problem, the processing. There should be a structured processing. I have given to understand that there are various system-based models, like in farm credit agriculture. If a system-driven agriculture processing happens, then it will increase the speed and it will standardize the processing system. There are softwares who are capturing the localized data, even at the taluk level, even at the block level. What about the scale of finance? What about the natural calamities? What about the cropping pattern? And based on that, if the basic information is fed in the system, within 10 minutes, entire processing will be over and the documentation will come out. Similarly, in other ways also we can work out, like internet-based kiosk banking model. Internet-based kiosk banking model, I think we have run out of time. The final notice has come, so I will end with this. And I think there are certain ways we have to work out, and we have to think differently to do the things different. Thank you.
Thank you. To end, I think we have already overshot the time. I've received the final warning, red card has come. So to end with this, I think the banking sector recognizes that mass market has to be tapped, and to tap this, we should aim to reduce the transactions cost by 1/10 and to improve our physical presence by new models to at least 10 times. Then only this can be solved. With these remarks, we'd like to end the session. I don't think we have time for questions also. Do we have time for any question? No. So the nod has already come, so we end the session here. Sorry we could not give time to you. Thank you very much.